Hello and welcome to episode 96 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Laura London. Laura is a former McKinsey consultant who is now CEO, consultant, and coach at Calocedrus Partners, where she helps clients build better leaders, teams, and organizations by tapping into their higher purpose and the power of their people. In this episode, we explore the role of authenticity, curiosity, and emotional alignment in leadership communication, and how getting outside might just be your greatest tool for showing up with clarity and conviction. Whether you're leading a team, navigating change, or simply want to be more impactful in your communication, this conversation offers practical insights and inspiring takeaways. Let's dive in. Laura, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's so good to be here with you, Scott. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Really looking forward to our conversation. Before we jump too far into it, why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about you, your background, career journey, and the cool stuff that you're working on today?
Yeah, okay, sure. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in New York. So I guess you could say I'm naturally direct and naturally a fast walker. But I'd like to think that I've softened a little bit, slowed down a little bit over this last decade living in California. I'm the daughter of a New York City public school teacher and a small business owner. So I like to think I was really destined for the business of education. And that took many forms throughout my life so far. So, starting with classic corporate route, where I started my career in an HR leadership rotation program. And then I followed a mentor actually and helped launch an internal process improvement team for Kaplan. And I got something called my Six Sigma Black Belt, which really only means something if you are my age or maybe a little bit older, but still something I'm still to this day very, very proud of. And then eventually I felt that I needed to take a break. And so I wanted to go back to grad school. And I was accepted to the University of Cambridge in England, which was for me quite an accomplishment. And I decided to teach English and travel a little bit before I did that. All a great experience, and all really taught me that I was not cut out for academia. And so I said, well, what's kind of the opposite of this? Still in education. And so I moved back to New York City and got into the world of ed tech, which was wonderful. I took on some leadership positions. That brought me to consulting. And I was consulting with heads of learning, heads of talent, heads of people. And that brought me to McKinsey. So I joined McKinsey. I was there for about 7 years in the people and organizational performance practice. Wonderful, wonderful time. And then finally, I decided it was time to go out on my own and start my own leadership consulting and coaching practice, Calocedrus Partners. So that's what I'm working on today. And a little bit about that. I mean, at Calocedrus, we really specialize in helping high performing teams, high performing individuals accomplish more than they thought possible. So to do it, we really try to tap into their unique purpose and their unique power. And I think what's different about us is we really put nature at the center of that. And we use it in all types of ways, right? A lot of our clients we're working virtually with, but still there's so many ways to bring nature in to how we do it, from simple visioning to purpose walks to activity-based learning. And one of my favorites would be forest bathing at the other end of the spectrum, where we really immerse our bodies and our minds in nature. And I've just found over time it's the perfect complement to more traditional ways of learning and leading because it really activates our full being. And it's the best tool I've found to both find inspiration and help people process fears that hold us back because we're all human and we all have fears. So the main thing besides that I'm working on today is getting our retreat center up and running. And so we'll be able to host all types of fun experiences. We have a 40-acre property in the Sierra Nevada mountains where I'm fortunate to call home now. And so I like to think that I'm a city girl at heart with a huge appreciation for the healing benefits of nature. And with the rise of AI and polarization, I'm excited about creating healing spaces for people to really strengthen their connections to both themselves and to others. So that's what we've been working on.
That is fascinating. And I know when you and I reconnected briefly, we were talking about the idea of nature and how I really focus a lot on that, just with the busyness and the stress of work and life, really making it a priority for me to get outside. And I had never, I don't think consciously thought about it, but for me, it's just one of those things, getting out into the woods or just simply walking through the tree lined streets of my neighborhood really helps to just reset me, to ground me, to calm me until my dogs see another dog and they start going crazy and that kind of snaps me out of it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I love the nature aspect of this. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it. And
yeah,
when you mentioned right, your parents, teacher, small business owner, and it was just kind of cool as you led through your experience, right? Yeah, it does seem that environment growing up in that environment with those parents, kind of leading you or pulling you some sort of into the direction between ed and ed tech, and really now with the opening up your own consulting practice and the retreat. That is absolutely awesome
yeah.
to hear.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a journey, and it is funny to identify as a city girl and really want nature to be at the heart of what I do for the remainder of my years. Just similarly to what you were saying, when I think back to the cities, in New York, Central Park was where I went for clarity. I didn't know why. I just knew I was drawn to it. And then same in San Francisco, Golden Gate Park. It drew me. And whenever I've had my hardest times, I have just wanted to get out into nature. So learning about the actual healing properties, right? That this was not just in my mind, right?
Mhm.
So the Japanese have scientifically proven the benefits of being in nature. And this is not just for the body, it's also for the mind. Like the amount of benefits that people actually get just by spending some time in nature is remarkable. It's an approved form of therapy in Japan. And so if we can just bring a little bit more of that to our busy lives,
Mhm.
I think we can all just benefit immensely.
And for me, as I'm out there, it definitely helps me clear my mind, which in turn, I believe, helps me to communicate my ideas more effectively. So when I come back from my time outside, whether it's a morning walk or more often than not, I do mine at lunchtime. I come back, I'm much more able to kind of focus and get my thoughts and my ideas out more clearly and more
Yeah.
effectively. And I would think, Laura, with your experience, right, kind of the diverse experience that you had, whether it was working at a big consulting firm, doing teaching, grad school, the corporate learning stuff, you've encountered some really good communicators, probably some bad communicators, but some really good communicators. We can learn from both.
Yeah.
But as you think about this idea of effective communication or that somebody is a great communicator, when you hear that phrase, what's the image that's conjured up in your mind?
Ooh, the image is somebody with clarity. I picture the clarity of mind and heart, almost like a line connecting the two. Yeah, and I think what I've seen over time is great communicators. They do one thing incredibly well and incredibly consistently, and it's that they speak with conviction from both the mind and the heart. And we've all felt it, right? When someone shows up with this alignment, it just feels different. It sounds so easy, sure, right? Just do it. But this is so complicated. This is at the heart of why, in my mind, leadership is so hard and why communicating as a leader is so hard. As we move up in the organization, we tend to feel almost like a puppet, right? We feel like we have to convey a certain thing in a certain way. And for many of us, that gets confusing. And we stop trusting our instincts and instead maybe try to memorize a script, right? We put content before connection.
When I hear that, the word that comes to mind or something that comes to mind is authenticity. And people can very quickly detect when you are being inauthentic with them in your communication. So if we think about a work example, and I think about, you and I, for the listeners, you and I worked together in an organization that at that time was going through lots of change, lots of transition. The analogy constantly being used was we were, building the plane as it was flying or building the bus as it was going down the road.
Right.
So a lot of times we get a message from a leader that things are great, things are going to be awesome. And you could tell deep down they did not believe that. And
Right.
I think about, right, if you're in those positions where you're trying to engage your team, keep your team motivated, get a message out there, you really need to step back and think about what is the best way for me to convey this? Because if I'm trying to spin it or sugarcoat it, people are going to sniff it out and it's going to have the opposite reaction that I want.
Exactly. And we've all felt that before. I like to remind people about the importance of the how. So often we focus on the what. What am I going to say? Right? What are the bullets? What do I need to focus on landing? But the how is just as important, if not more, right? So, how do I want to feel when I'm communicating? And how do I want others to feel when they hear me communicating or are in my leadership presence? And one example that I want to share, I'm working with a client. He's an SVP of engineering and product. And he's been going through a multiple reductions in force right there, which is always a hard time. Hard time for the person who has to give the message, hard time for the people who have to hear the message. And we really worked on, instead of focusing on memorizing the bullets, how does he want to show up for himself and others? And this completely shifted how he prepared and also how he showed up. And he was able to say, using your words, I showed up authentically as me. And as a result, I feel good about my performance. And I know that my words came from both my mind and my heart.
The how that you mentioned, and it's interesting, I never really, I guess, thought about it like that, is likely the linchpin that is missing from a lot of people's communications. Almost everybody gets the what. It's very easy to memorize the what and then the why. Here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing it. But that middle component of how do I want people to feel? How do I want to feel about myself? Is, I think, the bridge to the authenticity, and it's going to be what makes a big difference in how your communication lands. Is it ultimately achieving the goal that I want when you combine the what, the why, and then factor in those two aspects of the how? I think is really that trifecta of communication.
It's so powerful and it's really hard for people. And I think one of the most powerful things we do with every client or every team is start with a leadership vision. And this does not mean, the traditional, what do we want to accomplish and how many days and what KPIs. This is the how. How do I want to show up as a leader for myself, for others? How do I want to feel? And then the KPI becomes more around something you can or can't feel. Did I show up calm and in flow? Or did I show up reactive? And this completely seems to change the game for people because you start to realize it's not about my role, it's not about my title, it's about me. I'm in control no matter what I'm doing, no matter what the project is. The shadow that I leave is completely up to me. And I think that's where the magic starts happening. And once you have that clarity, you can communicate anything because you speak with alignment of the mind and the heart. And that's what's important because we're people and we're communicating with people. And so the more we can embrace that human connection, the better our messages are going to land.
You nailed it there, because really our thoughts and reactions truly are the only thing we can control. Especially if you're working at a large organization, there are so many things that are out of your control, decisions that happen above you, outside influences in the market, how your clients decide, their purchasing patterns, they have other priorities. a million things that are out of your control. The one thing you can control is kind of your thoughts, your emotions, and how you react to all of these things spinning around you.
And it's empowering, right? It reminds us that we have agency, even if we feel like a puppet in a very noisy, tumultuous system. When we stop back and set a vision for ourselves as a leader, we regain control. And that's what I love, love, love doing with people. You go from this state of feeling like the world is happening to you to seeing actually, I do have choice. I do have control. I can speak and act the way I choose. And that's where the communication and the impact really starts happening.
That's a nice segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, Laura, is as you're thinking about the workforce today and probably specifically with the work that you're doing with leaders. And over the past 5 years, the world has changed a bunch. The world of work has changed a bunch. What are some of the key communication skills that leaders really need to nail today in order to be successful, to grow in their careers, and to help their people and their organization to be successful?
I love that question so much. And there are so many skills, but the three that I'm going to pick are probably not what you would expect. So the three that I see, and again, I work with people across industries and roles, um, but I have been finding more and more it all comes back to curiosity, empathy, and powerful questioning. Now, to be clear, people are not coming in explicitly stating these learning goals. However, they often appear as necessary complements to the way people are currently operating. So, for instance, I'm working with the head of talent for a large energy company. She's an incredibly effective leader. She has a huge heart. However, sometimes people see her as a bit impatient, a bit of a bulldozer in the way she communicates, right? She identifies as a change agent. So, increasing her curiosity for others, her empathy for why change is so hard for so many people, and her questioning versus her telling of her messages has had a huge improvement for her and her overall performance. She is able to bring people together better. She's able to bring people along better, and she gets better outcomes. And so these might not seem like communication skills, but I think they're really at the heart of how we communicate because if we have genuine curiosity for what others are thinking when we're engaging and communicating with them and we genuinely care about landing our messages, then we've got to ask powerful questions. We've got to understand what's important to them so that we can tailor our messages and talk about things they care about.
I 100% agree. All three of those are critically important when it comes to not only leadership, but effective communication. And fortunately, especially for both of us, these are all things that can be taught. Some people you may feel like they're naturally curious or they're naturally empathetic, but likely throughout their life, they've been given and provided and taken opportunities to flex those muscles, so to speak. If you think of a kid growing up where they can ask why 1,000 times and their parents don't snap at them, versus a kid that asks why and their parents say, don't worry about it, it doesn't matter, that you keep doing that over time, you're going to see people kind of veer off into completely different directions. So, from a leadership perspective, whether it's yourself or your team, creating opportunities and environment where you feel comfortable asking questions and being inquisitive and curious about why things are the way that they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think empathy is a tricky one. A lot of people that I work with come in and they say, I'm a head of talent. Of course I'm empathetic, right? I want everyone in this company to have the best possible shot at doing well and having a great life. But the thing about empathy is to truly have empathy, we stop assuming we know what's best for people, right? We stop assuming we know what basic words mean. Just a simple word in business, there's so much jargon. And we might think, well, we said increase profits, right? Whatever the words are, we just assume, especially as we move up the hierarchy, we assume people understand what these words mean. That really can be so complicated and have we bury the message. And it's said in ways that could mean so many different things to so many people. And so empathy really, as a leader, is taking the time to define and taking the time to ask people if it makes sense or if there's anything that's still unclear. And when they use words, asking them what that means to them, telling them you don't want to assume. And so these are the things I think as a communicator that make a huge difference, especially if you're trying to lead any type of change where emotions are high. You really, the empathy part is so important, and it seems easier than it is.
It always seems easier than it is. Wow, it's such a shame. Laura, shifting gears a little bit, we've talked a lot about skills of other people. If I were to say, ask someone close to you, friend, colleague, mentor, family member, what's the key communication skill that really has contributed to Laura's success? What's got her to where she is today? What would they share with me?
Yeah, that's another great question. And I think just playing off what we just talked about, I think I've always been really curious. And that's what has driven me throughout my life. I think I've had to learn a lot about empathy. I thought I was really empathetic. And then everything we just spoke about, right? I speak from personal experience, kind of learning empathy was a lot deeper. And communicating with empathy actually meant a lot more. And that's something I've had to learn over time. And then the extroversion has helped me. Being an extrovert, I think, has helped me with being curious, and also probably gotten me into trouble sometimes. That could also be the directness of the New Yorker.
It's kind of interesting for me as an introverted person. Curiosity has helped me somewhat come out of my shell because I may not be as comfortable just making small talk and talking about other things, whether it's in work settings, personal settings, but the idea that I have this curiosity where I want to know about people's backgrounds, why they're doing things. This broke. Why did it break? Why was it done like this? So it's kind of interesting how that skill of curiosity, if you're an extrovert or an introvert, really does play a big part in really helping, I think, career success, life success, and definitely in communications.
Yeah, and it reminds me of another client I'm working with. He's a founder, and he's an engineering background, but he's been having to do sales. And he at first kept saying, I'm not an extrovert. This is not for me. So helping him to realize that a lot of the best salespeople are introverts because they're curious, because they show up with empathy, because they ask powerful questions. These are great skills for any person who's trying to communicate, especially in sales. And I think that shift for him has been really helpful in reframing sales to problem solving.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Sales oftentimes gets a bad rap. There's lots of negative stereotypes and connotations that go along with it as a profession. But as you mentioned, at the heart of it, if you're doing it right, sales is helping someone solve a problem. And in order to solve the problems, you need to understand what's causing it, what are the symptoms versus the causes. And if you're curious and you really want to know, one, you're going to find it out. But then I believe also people are going to sense that you really are genuinely curious and you're not just going off of a checklist of these are my scripted questions I have to ask them so I can put them in my CRM, or my boss is going to be upset if I didn't check this box. That curiosity definitely bleeds through in your conversations.
Exactly.
Laura, you touched on it very briefly earlier around a mentor, I believe following mentor over to a different organization. Who has been someone from throughout your career that has influenced your communication style? Maybe something little that you picked up from them and maybe tweaked a little bit and put it into your tool belt.
This is such a hard question for me because I really feel like throughout my career, there have been different role models, amazing communicators who have come through, and they all have had such different communication styles. So I think if it's okay, I really have four.
I'll let it slide. All right, I'll let it slide.
And one of them, so I think you'll appreciate that
Yep.
one. So the first was a professor at Cornell's School of Industrial Labor Relations. And I have so much respect for professors and the way they have to communicate. It's a bit of a different type of communication. So Chris Collins, he's so smart, so humble, so approachable. He gently pushes students to think for themselves and follow their convictions. A true mind heart alignment. And it's a very specific style where he gets the best outcomes from his students repeatedly. Next was an HR legend, the first person to hire me into corporate America, Mike DeAmbrose. Now, anyone who knows Mike knows Mike is a force. He most recently was the head of HR for Boeing before he entered into retirement. He is charismatic, he's inspirational, he enthusiastically encourages people to believe in themselves and play to their strengths. That was when I first learned about the whole movement of kind of playing to your strengths. And then the next is someone we both know, Raj Ramachandran. When we just spoke about kind of the what's needed to be truly good at sales and how the introvert can form such a connection with somebody that they inspire. I learned all that from Raj. And then last but not least was a mentor at McKinsey and a leader in the world of nature-based coaching, Fiona Campbell. Fiona leads with heart. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before. It feels calming, it feels supportive, and again, it brings out the best in others. So, what's so amazing with these four different styles is that they are so different yet so authentic to each of them. And because it's so authentic, every time I talk with them, it activates something in me. It
Mhm.
makes me want to reach even higher in all aspects of my life. So these are fierce communicators with completely different styles. And it really comes down to showing up intentionally to communicate effectively. And this shapes how I show up today, and also why I think authenticity and alignment are just such important parts of leadership and communication.
That is so cool to hear. And yes, absolutely love Raj. He was the very first guest on this show. He is episode number one, very first guest. So when I thought of doing this, he was one of the first people I reached out to. And then in true Raj nature, he immediately said yes, jumped right in with both feet, had a fantastic conversation. And the Mike sounds familiar. If it's who I'm thinking of, I think you and I met with him on a meeting before in Chicago. I
Yes,
think so. And if I think it's kind of funny, if
right?
I think about the two of those contrasted to each other, dramatically different styles, personalities. But as you mentioned, you can take little things from everyone that you interact with and figure out how do I make this my own and how do I build off of this. And then as you mentioned, just being energized. When you have people in your network that when you talk to them, as you said, it activates something that energizes you. And I think it helps to kind of continually notch your skills up a level.
Exactly.
Laura, as we're wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have to people listening to this? Really, I think broadly around the importance of the skills that we talked about today and the impact that it can have on their lives.
Well, I would advise anyone who aims to be a good communicator to create a leadership vision and do it early and revisit it, refine it, see it as a work in progress. But this, as we've been talking about, this should not be just about what you want to be doing. It should be how you want to spend your time, how you want others to feel in your presence, and how you want to feel most days. This how is just such an important piece of the vision. I can't say it enough. And what I think is so empowering about this, especially if you're young in your career, it'll help you realize that it doesn't make such a huge difference exactly what your job title is, because you can practice showing up the way you want to show up every day, regardless of what your title is. So if you don't know yet how you want to show up, I would say start paying attention to the leaders around you. What are they doing that inspires you? What are they doing that doesn't inspire you? And if that doesn't help, maybe try picturing yourself at 60. What advice would you have for yourself today? And this is often a really helpful tactic to help people kind of take a step back and contemplate what's really most important to you. What is success going to look like down the road? What do I want my legacy to be? And of course, if none of this resonates, just simply get out in nature. Just put the phone away, reduce distractions, just let the beauty of the world, wherever you live, whatever's around you, find some trees, get out there, and just give it some time away from these distractions and see what comes to mind.
That is fantastic advice, Laura. Thank you again for joining me. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Special thanks again to my guest, Laura London. In a noisy and stress-filled world, Laura's reminder that sometimes the most effective leadership skill is simply stepping outside and listening to nature, to our others, and to ourselves is more important now than ever before. As we wrap up, remember that mastering communication is a continuous journey. Make sure to stay connected with Communicast by subscribing so you can benefit from future conversations with guests. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful for your support. Leaving a rating or review is a fantastic way to let us know the impact this show has had on you. Thanks, and have a great day.